A little late in the day for espresso, but I'm gonna take the hit. Hello, and welcome back to another video. My name is Heather, and as always, I am reading with a vengeance, and as always, I hope you are as well. If you are new to my channel, welcome. I'm very happy to have you here. If you are a returning subscriber, thank you so much for coming back. I hope everybody is doing very well. Today, I'm going to talk about the books that I read in the second half of May. I did a wrap up for the first half of May. I will, if I remember, link that video down below. Well, I thought I was only gonna have like 4 books to talk about, but I don't know, those last 4 days in May, I got a fire under my butt or something, and I read through some books. I do want to apologize for the sound quality in my June TBR video. Okay, so we live in Central Connecticut and a fairly old house, and we don't have central air. Every summer we have to put in 2, what do you call those? Those ACs that you put into a window ACs, and they're super loud. And then on top of that, we have fans going as well because the ACs have to be in bedrooms because we don't have any compatible windows anywhere else but 2 bedrooms. And I know, first world troubles, but I just wanted to apologize for the sound quality. Hopefully it'll be a lot better and you just have those annoying birds. I say annoying, tongue in cheek. I really, really love the wildlife that surrounds my house. I'm actually pretty lucky. Again, with the weather, let's get on with the books that I read in the second half of May. So just a reminder, just to throw out there the books that I read in the first half of May that are covered in my other video. A Spindle Splintered by Alex E. Harrow, The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin, The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak, Blood for Blood by Ryan Groden, Penguin the Magpie, The Odd Little Bird Who Saved a Family by Cameron Bloom and Bradley Trevor Grieve, Squeeze Me by Carl Hyacin, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, and Travel Anywhere and Avoid Being a Tourist by Geraldine Gerba and Pavio Rosati. So those are the books that I read in the first half. The second half, the first one in the second half of May was an audiobook, and that was World War Z, An Oral History of the Zombie War by Max Brooks. You might be familiar with the movie with Brad Pitt, which was actually a pretty well done movie about zombies. The book is really, really good. Do you say multicast or multicasted? There's lots of people playing the different roles in the audiobook, really well-known people too, and there's probably like 20 of them. So the movie follows the story of the book fairly well if you saw the movie, but it's told differently in the book. The book is like a series of interviews 20 years after the whole zombie pandemic, I guess you would call it, happened. The book interviews multiple people who were there at the time that it happened, and it kind of tells you different parts of the world, different professions, different theories about what caused it, and then what happened during it, and then what measures were taken to kind of live with the aftermath. There were a couple of parts that were very deep, unsettling creepiness. As far as zombie stories go, this one was really well done in that it made you feel like it's an actual oral history of what happened. So it leaves that unsettled feeling in your gut. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate horror when it's done really well, and here it is done. I gave this one 3.5 stars. I rated it 4 stars. I rounded up on Goodreads, but I would say as far as how it made me feel, 3.5 stars. The next book that I attempted to read in May, this was a really big disappointment. This is a Instagram and YouTube darling, and that is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. This is a story of a young man who is writing a letter to his mother who doesn't know how to read. It is a brutally honest exploration of race, class, masculinity, and our current American moment, immersed as we are in addiction, violence, and trauma, but undergirded by compassion and tenderness. I really had high hopes for this one. It is, a lot of people talk about how beautifully written it is, and I don't disagree. It is beautifully written, but I couldn't quite grasp the story very well. And to be honest, I think it kind of went over my head. So yeah, I couldn't finish it. I probably got maybe 30 pages in. Did I give it enough of a chance? I don't know. The older I get and the more I realize just how many books are out there that I want to read, I gotta be grabbed pretty early on for me to spend the time with the book. And I haven't yet decided if I'm going to give this another go. If you read this and you have some pearls of wisdom, please feel free to comment down below. But I was so looking forward to this and I just couldn't do it. So DNF, no rating. Wah, wah. The next book I read was One by One by Ruth Ware, and I really enjoyed this one. I didn't love it. I have to say, this is the third Ruth Ware book that I have read. I read In a Dark, Dark Wood, which is so far my favorite. I read The Woman in Cabin 10, and then One by One. I would say One by One I liked more than The Woman in Cabin 10, but not as much as In a Dark, Dark Wood. This one follows a group of people who go to stay in this remote chalet for a skiing vacation. And it's a group of people who all work for the same company. And it's kind of like a social media app startup company. And they go and they stay in the chalet run by Erin and her friend Danny. While they're all there, an avalanche happens and they're all snowed in. And then people start dying. It is told in multiple perspectives. It's told from the perspective of Erin, and then it alternates with Liz, who is one of the party that goes to stay at this chalet. Somewhat predictable. I kind of guessed who the killer is, and that might be by design. So the one thing that you really you're not trying to guess who it is because you kind of have a good idea of who it is, but really the mystery is why. There's history between the different people who work for this company, and so that's slowly unraveling. There's this atmosphere. Ruth Ware is pretty good at creating like an atmosphere, and it's very claustrophobic because they're all kind of trapped in the chalet. I feel like it was well written. The one thing I will say, if I haven't said already, I listened to this one. One of the things is that the chapters are short, and like I said, it goes from Erin to Liz to Erin to Liz, and it's fairly quick each time. But the beginning of each chapter starts off with, so the name of the company is called Snoop, and it's kind of a music-based app where people can follow. It works kind of like Instagram, whereas Instagram, the basis is photographs, where Snoop, the basis is music. And so people can follow people and find out what they're listening to at the time and then listen to the same stuff. And so the beginning of each chapter, it started with, Snoop ID, what their handle is, ABC, Snoop followers, X number, and then Snoop subscriptions, like how many that person follows too. And so the numbers would kind of change. The ID would always be the same. And I don't think that I ever saw really a good reason why each time, if you're reading the physical book, you'd like skim past that, no big deal. Well, if you're listening to the audiobook, the narrator reads it every single time, and it got to be a little repetitive and annoying. So that's the only thing I'll say. Other than that, the narrator was pretty good at doing the two different characters. So no complaints there. So there was just that one little nitpicky thing. It was pretty decent mystery. Like I said, you kind of figure out who it is. It's just a matter of why. I gave this one 3.5 stars. The next book I read is one that I am one of a handful of people in the world who hasn't read it yet, and finally I'm a member of the club, and that is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This, of course, if you're one of those 5 people, well, even if you're one of the 5 people who haven't read it yet, you know what it's about. It's Chanel Miller's memoir. She is the rape victim for the Stanford rape case that happened in 2015. She's the one who basically became known when her victim statement that was read in court, the date of the sentencing was posted on BuzzFeed, and it had like 14 million views, I think, in like a very short period of time. It went viral, obviously. It's her story, and it's a good story. I didn't rate it because I didn't feel like rating someone's memoir about this particular topic. I just didn't feel good about that, so I didn't rate it. It's a stellar story. She is very talented as far as writing skills go, and she's also very skilled at portraying what happened to her and how it affected not only her, but her family, her views on her future. The one thing that I will say that I just was very impressed by is I went into this thinking that there was going to be a lot of man bashing in this book. There wasn't any at all. The thing that was most infuriating is basically the American justice system and how that treated this case. Infuriating. The other takeaway that people will get from this, and this is something that I've learned before reading this, but it really drove it home in this book, and that is, we need to come away from teaching our little girls to be careful what they say, what they do, what they wear, where they go, who they talk to, all of that, and lean more towards teaching our little boys that, it's not okay to touch in certain ways or say certain things or view other, little girls in certain ways or all of that. Because most of this case those were the questions that were directed at the victim, the blaming the victim mentality that we have, and I'm pretty sure it's not just our justice system, but it's, I think, pretty universal. So that really hit hard in this book, and she just did a really good job. It's very well written. I didn't feel like I was reading a textbook, and I didn't feel like I was reading a woe is me tale either. She hit a really, really good balance in telling her story. Highly recommend, but obviously there's going to be trigger warnings, so be aware of that. One of the things that I don't do very often, but I'm trying to do a little bit more, especially for purposes of these wrap-ups, so that I can give a little bit more as far as my experience with the book. I don't like writing in books, but my annotations I've started using the Notes app on my phone, and I take pictures of it. And a couple of things that I just wanted to share with you. I expected man bashing in this book, and there wasn't any of that. In fact, it was just the opposite. So if you don't know anything about the story, she was assaulted out in public on Stanford campus behind a dumpster. And it could have been a whole lot worse if it were not for two men who were passing by, saw what was going on, and chased Brock Turner down and held on to him until the police came. And what Chanel says about masculinity in general, she says, what we needed to raise in others was this instinct, the ability to recognize in an instant right from wrong, the clarity of mind to face it rather than ignore it. I learned that before they had chased Brock, the two men had checked on me first. Masculinity is often defined by physicality, but that initial kneeling is as powerful as the leg sweep, the tackling. Masculinity is found in the vulnerability, the crying. I thought that was beautiful. Another thing that she talks about is that when we hear about victims and the perpetrators, we view them as, the weak and the monsters respectively. And she talks about how that's, by one instance, that is not who a person is on the whole. And one of the things that she says about this is during the trial, the jury was forced to pick, is he wholesome or monstrous? Because of course, during the trial, Brock Turner, the people who were advocating for him painted the picture of he was this star athlete, he was this star student, he was such a nice guy, I grew up with him, he was my ex-boyfriend, he never did this, la 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 la, right? But she says, but I never questioned that any of what they said about him was true. In fact, I need you to know it was all true. The friendly guy who helps you move and assists senior citizens in the pool is the same guy who assaulted me. One person can be capable of both. Society often fails to wrap its head around the fact that these truths often coexist. They are not mutually exclusive. Bad qualities can hide inside a good person. That's the terrifying part. I thought that was stunning. I have like 3 other pictures here that I could talk to you about, but I don't want to completely read the book to you. It's just very, very well written and really hits points on the head. Highly recommend. I didn't rate this one, just recommend it. The next book I read in the second half of May was My Policeman by Bethan Roberts. I was super excited to read this. As I've mentioned before, I discovered this one because I'm a huge Harry Styles fan, and I found out he's going to be playing the lead in the movie, which is being made currently. This story this takes place in the 1950s. In England, and where at a time and a place where being homosexual is illegal. I mean, literally, you get thrown in jail if you find out that you are partaking in lewd behavior. And this follows Marion, who as a teenager, her best friend's brother, Tom, she has a crush on him, and she kind of insinuates herself into his life. And they become really good friends, but she cares a lot more about him than he does about her. And then he becomes a policeman, and then he meets Patrick, who is not curator, but he works for a museum. He's very well cultured, a little bit older. They develop a relationship, but they can't really be together in an outward way. And kind of as a cover, Tom marries Marion, and Marion knows that Tom is friends with Patrick, and I think deep down knows truly the basis of their relationship, but she's in denial for the longest time. It's mostly told, there's I think 4 or 5 parts to this book. It's mostly told from Marion's point of view. 40 years later, in 40 years, Patrick has had a stroke, and he is living with Marion and Tom, and Marion is taking care of him. Marion is kind of writing a journal to Patrick, kind of talking about all the events that leads up to this incident that happens that changes their lives forever. So I think it's really an interesting look at where the world used to be as far as the view about homosexuality. I appreciated that very much. I can't even imagine being arrested because of who you love. And I know there's still homophobic behavior today, which is, I can't even fathom why that is. Yes, I appreciated looking at the history of it. It's very well written. It starts off very slow. I will describe this book as a slow burn, so be forewarned. The story is very good. The characters are written fairly well. You get a really good idea of who these folks are. While it's a slow burn, you are intrigued. The pages are turning because you want to know what has happened that has led it to be where they are today. It's heartbreaking, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this is based in fact. Well, a lot of it is, but the actual incident, it feels, I don't know, there's like this trueness to it. Because of the slow burn, I don't do really well with slow burns. I mean, I think I need a little bit more. This was really well done, but because of the slow burn, I gave it 3.5 stars. I still would recommend it for sure. The next book I read in the second half of May is Blood on Snow by Nesbo. This is a standalone because Nesbo has a couple of, I believe, series. He is, I believe, a Norwegian author, and most of, if not all of his books take place in that area. And this book follows, it's fairly short, it's less than 200 pages, I want to say. Yeah, it's only 180 pages, so I guess it would be a novella. And this follows Olaf, who is an assassin for hire with a heart of gold, of course, right? And he has been tasked with killing his boss's wife because she is having an affair. Well, Olaf kind of takes matters in his own hands. He kills somebody else instead to try to fix the problem. That turns out to be somebody important to his boss, and shit goes down. I really enjoyed this more than I thought I would. There was a little bit of a twist at the end. Is twist the right word? Yeah, I guess. I can't think of another word for it. Something happens that you think it happens a certain way, and then like the last page you realize it happened another way. I appreciate when an author kind of takes you for a ride and then pushes you out of the wagon. You know what I'm saying? So I gave this one 4 stars. The next book I read, you guys, I'm a little late to the party with this one because this is a YouTube darling, and that is Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. You guys, this one, I loved this one so much. I listened to it, and if you haven't read this yet, I highly recommend listening to it. It is narrated by Adam Lazare White, and let me tell you, he can read the phone book, and I will pay to listen to it. He does such a fantastic job. In fact, as soon as I finished this one and found out that he narrated S.A. Cosby's other book, Blacktop Wasteland, immediately started listening to it. But I digress. Razorblade Tears, if you don't know, this follows Ike and Buddy Lee. They are, Ike is black and he is an ex-con. He did 15 years in prison for a violent crime, but it's been, I think, another 12 or 15 since he's been out of prison, and he's picked up his life. He has his own business, got his wife, and he lives the straight and narrow. Buddy Lee, also an ex-con, he's white. He doesn't lead a life of crime anymore, but he's an alcoholic. He's living in a trailer. His wife has left him, and he's basically on the road to nowhere. They have sons, Isaiah and Derek, respectively, married to each other. And because they're gay, Ike and Buddy Lee do not have good relationships with them. They are both homophobic, are disappointed in their sons. Then one day they find out that Derek and Isaiah were murdered. Their whole viewpoint changes, and they realize that it shouldn't have mattered who their sons loved. You know, they are wallowing in regret. But because of their backgrounds, they get together and they decide to go on the warpath to find out what happened to their sons and who was behind it. It reads like a suspense thriller. The dialogue, let me tell you, the dialogue in this between Buddy Lee and Ike is just stellar, and there's a lot of it. And this takes place in Virginia, so very southern backdrop, both in geography and culture and twang and phrasing and the idioms they use. It's just fantastic. There's some things were just laugh out loud funny. Buddy Lee is hilarious, and they just get into shenanigans. They just pretty much hop in the truck and they go looking for people, and they're following leads, and the people that they meet along the way, they are super colorful characters also. Just what a fantastic story. Gave this one 5 stars, all the stars. Can't recommend it enough. Yes, there's a little bit of language, there's a little bit of violence, and if that triggers you, you know, just beware, but I absolutely highly recommend it for anybody. What a great story. And on top of that, this message, I'm so glad it's out there, and I'm so glad this book is popular, because it is such an important message. Really, you really need to think about if you are one of those parents who view your child because they are in one way a member of the LGBTQ plus community, and you're disappointed in them for that reason. Please try to ask yourself, if they were gone tomorrow, would you care who they loved? Really? Anyways, it really talks about regret and grief in a very profound way. The story itself is just, you know, despite all of the heaviness of those topics, which were really well done, such a compelling and enjoyable ride as far as following Ike and Buddy Lee, and all the regret and grief that they're feeling, they put behind their drive to find out what happened to their sons and make it right as much as they possibly can, and nothing is going to stop them. Beautifully written. I just can't say enough about this. I wanted to do like a separate video for this book, but I can't not talk about it. I might still do that because I'm also like envisioning, oh, that's the other thing. I was envisioning like who would play them in a movie, because as soon as I finished this book, I'm like, this book needs to be a movie. And as soon as I started doing like research, like looking up pictures of actors that I would put in the roles of these characters. I came across an article that I think Paramount has bought the rights to this book, so it is going to be a movie. That's so exciting. I cannot wait. Who knows when it'll happen, because sometimes they move at a snail's pace, but super excited. It's going to be a movie. But anyways, I probably will do another a review of Fiction Depiction video anyways, but I couldn't do this video without just singing its praises. All the stars, 5 stars. Read it if you haven't already. And the last book I read for the month of May was To Kill a Mockingbird, the graphic novel. If you followed me before or watched my other videos, you know this is my all-time favorite book, and this is the one book that I collect different editions for. I think this is my 4th or 5th edition. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's all in color. It follows the story pretty closely, and it might come to you as a surprise that I say closely and not exactly, but I thought it was interesting that the author, this is by adapted and illustrated by Fred Fordham. I did notice as I'm reading it that he did take some liberties with the story, but then I read in the back, it says, this adaptation of To Kill a Mockingbird does not seek to reinvent Harper Lee's story and characters. The text is, as far as has been possible, directly taken from the novel. Where I have made changes, they have been for the sole purpose of best representing the story and sentiment of Lee's original work in this medium. So, and I thought he did a good job with that, with the liberties he did take. They're very small, but they're noticeable if you're familiar with the story. I'm not going to go too much of a synopsis. It's a very well-known story. I recommend it for anybody. The other thing that he did that I thought was fantastic, this isn't the only book that gets a lot of criticism for using certain language that is offensive today, but there's lots of books that use offensive language or language that people find offensive, and they say, well, it shouldn't, you know, we don't use those words anymore. And while I understand that, I think there are certain stories that language needs to be told to show what's going on in that story. And I've never been able to articulate it well, but he does at the end. He puts a specific little blurb at the end. It says, note on the language, the use of the word, I won't say it. The use of the N-word in To Kill a Mockingbird has caused some contention. Harper Lee included the word deliberately to illustrate the society she was writing about, presenting an unmediated portrait of a specific time and place. The novel addresses many social issues, class, politics, poverty, gender, but is primarily concerned with racial prejudice. The inclusion of the word, its dehumanizing power, and the ease with which it was used is central to understanding the themes of the novel. Perfectly said. I think there are some stories that require that, and I thought Fred Fordham is brilliant for the way he explained that phenomenon that happens in not just this book, but in many others. So keep that in mind if you come across a word that bothers you in a book and you question yourself, gosh, did that really need to be used? Really critically ask yourself, does it need to be used, and to really interpret what is going on in the story, and either where in time the story is taking place or the person that's using that word. Is it that person's personality and education and belief system that's the language that they would use? Sometimes it's just necessary. So I really appreciated that. Fred Fordham, thank you if you're watching. So, of course, I gave this 5 stars just because I'm biased. It's my favorite. And I thought it was really well done. And the illustrations are lovely. And I appreciate a color illustration. And it's a doozy. It's a pretty thick book. So, yes, 5 stars. So that is it. Those are the books that I have read in the month of May. Have you read any of these? If you have and you have something to say about it, I would love to hear it. Please put it down in the doobly-doo. If you're still watching at this point, I'd really appreciate it if you gave that like button a boop and subscribe. That would be wonderful. I'm really happy to have you here. I'm really enjoying doing these videos. The comments that you've been putting in, they make my day. I absolutely love talking with you guys. Keep it up, please. What was your favorite read for the month of May? I would love to know. Do you have some recommendations for me? Bring them on. I would love to hear about them. Until next time, I will see you later. Bye-bye.